The studios say that every soundstage has its own silence, a kind of breath held between shadows and light. But Stage 12 is different. Its
In the early
silence feels
1900s, the
aware,
burgeoning Hollywood
as
film
if
industry
something inside it is still listening. Technicians working the night shift speak of a single sound that breaks that silence at exactly 3:12 a.m.
silent film.
Just one footstep. The sharp echo of a high heel touching concrete, cutting through the dark like a memory that refuses to fade. They turn their heads, they look across the empty floor, and they swear they see the hem of a white dress disappearing behind the scaffolding, as though someone is still searching for a way out.
Mansfield, Ohio,
Her
was
name
birthplace.
floats through the studio corridors the way dust floats through a beam of light. Martha Mansfield, born in 1899, died in 1923. A face once adored on the silent screen, luminous enough to hold an audience without ever needing to say a word. Her beauty was
Glamorous world of
soft,
show business, like a
unthreatening,
fish to
the
water,
kind that
even with
made
her
early
humble
Hollywood
beginnings.
believe
She
she
was
could be
originally named
shaped
Martha.
into anything. Newspapers called her the girl with the quiet smile, a smile that seemed to glow even in black and white. But fame, like film stock, burns faster than it shines. And behind the softness of her image, there was a tension no camera ever caught. A woman
Martha's
watched
stardom.
too closely. A
Mansfield,
woman who
Ohio, had
knew
become
something
home
she
to
was
Martha
never
and her
meant to
mother,
know.
but it
A woman who vanished from her set minutes before the fire that ended her life. A woman whose final steps, according to old studio rumors, still echo long after the cameras stop rolling. Some stories fade with time. Others linger trapped between what was seen and what was silenced. Stage 12 holds one of those stories. And every night, at 3:12 a.m., it whispers
Martha
her
knew what she
name.
wanted to do.
She
but
was
had
born
no idea
Martha
how.
Ehrlich in
Fortunately,
1899, far from the glowing marquees that would one day bear her name. Her childhood unfolded in the soft, uneven quiet of New York's immigrant neighborhoods, where light filtered weakly through narrow apartment windows and winter pressed itself against the walls like an uninvited guest. Her mother worked long hours sewing costumes for small theaters, leaving Martha surrounded by scraps of silk and fading threads, her first exposure to the
Hospital
world
due
of
to an illness.
performance.
Not one to
Neighbors
simply
remembered
wait for
a
the
girl
right
who
moment.
spoke
Martha
little,
went
who watched everything, who seemed to carry a quiet longing in her eyes, long before she understood the shape of that longing. There was a small photograph taken when she was 10. She stands near a window, hands folded, eyes lifted towards something just outside the
for an
frame.
actor of such
The light
caliber as
hits her
Mary
face in a
Pickford
way
to
that
shoo Martha
suggests
away.
both hope and distance, as though she already sensed that the world she wanted existed somewhere far beyond the edges of the picture. Years later, a film historian would describe the photo as the moment the screen found her before she found the screen. It was the kind of image that felt prophetic only in retrospect. She grew up in a home where silence was more common than laughter. Her father's health was fragile, and his frequent absences
only
left the
occupy her
household
time with
suspended
acting.
in a
She took
tired
things
uncertainty.
much further.
Martha learned early that attention could be unpredictable, that affection could flicker like a candle threatened by the smallest draft. The theaters her mother worked for became her escape. She would sit in the back rows, listening to the rustle of costumes and the muffled footsteps backstage. The dim glow of the footlights fascinated her. It was not their brightness that drew her, but the way they carved shapes out of darkness, turning ordinary people into something
And
more.
with the help of her exceptional
Friends from her
beauty and
youth
grace,
recalled that she was never loud, never demanding. She had a way of slipping through rooms like an echo of herself, present but elusive. Teachers said she worked hard, though she often seemed distracted, as if her mind were rehearsing a different life. Her mother once wrote in a letter that her daughter
beauty
dreams
and
in
poise turned
silence.
heads.
It would become the defining paradox of her later fame, a star of the silent era whose greatest power came from stillness.
By her late teens, she began to model quietly for magazines.
her face, delicate and calm, photographed beautifully. Editors remarked on her ability to hold expression without strain, to convey emotion through the slightest movement of her eyes. Yet beneath that soft poise was a vulnerability shaped by years
For the
of
next
watching
several years,
more than speaking.
Martha posed for over
She had grown
300
accustomed to being
photographs.
observed, but rarely understood. There was no grand moment that sent her to Hollywood, only a gradual drift toward it, like a tide she could not resist. A casting director visiting New York saw her photograph, searched for her, and offered a chance to audition for a small film. Martha accepted without hesitation. She knew little about the industry, less about its dangers, but the promise of the camera's glow pulled her forward. For the first time,
For
she felt a
launching her
door
reputation
open
in
into
the
a
New York
world
acting
where the
scene,
silence she
Martha
carried
did what many
could be
celebrities do as
transformed
they
into
make
something
it big.
luminous. Before she left the city, she visited the empty theater where her mother once sewed costumes. She walked to the stage and stood beneath the cold lights. The building was dark, nearly abandoned, yet something about it felt familiar, almost tender. She placed one hand on the wooden floor,
The airlift,
as if imprinting
she
a
assumed
part
the
of
stage
herself
name
into the
Martha
space.
Early around 1970.
Years later, when asked about her early life, she would tell a reporter, "I grew up in the shadows. Hollywood just gave them a shape." She boarded a westbound train soon after. As it pulled away, the conductor later recalled seeing her stare out the window for a long time, as if watching her past dissolve behind the tracks. She carried only one suitcase, and a letter from her mother folded into its lining. The letter ended with a sentence that seemed to tremble between pride and fear.
Behind
"May the
Martha's
light
name change
treat
was
you
far
gently."
from arbitrary, and
But
mostly
Hollywood's
came from her
glow
wanting
does
to
not treat gently. It illuminates, reveals, blinds, and burns. And as Martha Mansfield began her journey into the city of bright dreams, she could not yet know how deeply that glow would shape her life, and how devastatingly it would follow her into death. Hollywood in the early 1920s moved like a restless tide, glittering on the surface while concealing the darker currents beneath. When Martha Mansfield arrived, she stepped into a landscape built from
Martha's persistence
ambition
paid
and
off when she
illusion,
began her first
where
foray
studio
into the
gates
film
opened
industry,
only for
signing
those the
on with
cameras deemed worthy. Her quiet beauty drew attention almost immediately. Casting agents described her face as made for light, a rare combination of softness and definition that translated gracefully onto the trembling frames of silent film. She appeared in small roles at first, background characters, fleeting glimpses in crowded scenes. But even these moments carried a strange magnetism. Viewers wrote letters asking,
Who took a
"Who is the
shine to
girl with
Martha?"
the still eyes?"
As the year
It was the
continued,
beginning
she
of her ascent. Directors liked working with her. She moved with an ease that felt instinctive, responding to direction with minimal adjustment, understanding the emotional weight of each gesture. In a medium without spoken dialogue, Martha's restraint became her greatest strength. She did not overact as so many others did. She held emotion quietly, letting it rise just enough for the camera to catch. Her silence became her language. It separated her from the chaos of the industry and created an
Until
aura that
1918,
audiences could
Martha's
not
movie-
forget. Her breakthrough came with roles that demanded presence more than spectacle. She played the thoughtful sister, the tragic lover, the woman whose inner world remained hidden beneath a composed expression. Studio executives took notice. They offered her better costumes, better lighting, better publicity. Her name began appearing on posters. Fan magazines called her the Silver Shadow, a nickname that lingered long after her passing. Martha
Shortly after
smiled
this,
in every
she received an
photograph,
offer she
though
couldn't pass
privately
up.
she confessed to colleagues that she sometimes felt as though the lens watched her too closely, tracing her vulnerability like a fingerprint. As her fame grew, so did the expectations placed upon her. The silent era was unforgiving to actresses who hesitated. They were expected to attend endless social gatherings, charm studio heads, pose for photographers at all hours, and present themselves as symbols of perfection. Martha complied, but quietly. She
Throughout her
avoided
life,
scandals,
Martha remained
kept her
close to her
personal life
mother, who
discreet,
seemed
and spent long hours alone in her dressing room studying scripts or reading. Her solitude confused some people in the industry. They mistook her introspection for weakness. But those who worked closest to her understood that she was protecting herself from a world that consumed its stars as quickly as it created them. It was during these years of rising success that Martha stumbled upon something she was never meant to see. The details remained unspoken for decades, scattered only through whispers from former studio employees. Some said she found a ledger hidden in a locked drawer. Others claim she overheard a conversation late at night when she returned to retrieve a forgotten item. Whatever the truth was, it changed her demeanor. She became more cautious, her expressions more measured. She asked subtle questions about the safety protocols on set, about insurance papers for stunt performers, about an actress who had left unexpectedly months prior. These inquiries reached the wrong ears. Studio systems at that time were built on control. They protected their interests fiercely, burying accidents and misconduct beneath contracts, threats, and carefully crafted press releases. Everything depended on maintaining the illusion of a flawless industry. Someone like Martha, visible, rising, attentive, posed a unique problem. Her intelligence, once considered an asset, became a quiet threat. She confided in a close friend that she had seen something that doesn't belong to the world of dreams. The friend, decades later, would recall the fear in her eyes when she said it. Something in Hollywood's glow, Martha realized, hid a truth darker than shadow. The pressure around her intensified as she prepared for a new project scheduled to shoot partly inside the notorious Stage 12. The soundstage was old, its walls thick with the scent of dust and heat from long-forgotten productions. Crew members joked that the place had its own mood, reacting strangely to sudden changes in lighting or temperature. Martha did not laugh with them. She walked through the empty stage one afternoon before filming began, pausing near a corner where the light never seemed to fully reach. A cinematographer watching from afar later said she stood there, as if listening to something. During this period, she hinted to colleagues that she planned to speak out about the truth she had discovered. The timing remains unclear, but several accounts suggest she intended to reveal it after finishing her current film. Studio officials noticed her shift in demeanor. They summoned her for meetings, urging her to remain focused on her career and reminding her of the consequences of misunderstandings. The language was polite, but the undertone was unmistakable. She was being watched. Despite the growing tension, Martha continued performing with grace. On set, she was professional, calm, luminous in front of the camera. None of her unease appeared on screen. But those closest to her saw the change. She double-checked her props. She kept her scripts with her at all times. She declined invitations she once accepted easily. She began locking her dressing room door even during short breaks. The glow of success no longer warmed her. It pressed against her like a weight. Her final weeks were marked by a quiet urgency. She spoke in low tones, rehearsed late into the night, and avoided walking alone through the studio corridors. A costume designer remembered seeing her pause at the entrance of Stage 12, staring into the vast darkness as though sensing an unseen presence waiting inside. It was an image that lingered in the designer's memory for years. Martha Mansfield, one of Hollywood's rising lights, standing before a soundstage that seemed to swallow the air around her. Her career was cresting beautifully, yet there was a fracture beneath its surface. A woman adored by audiences, a woman pursued by shadows, a woman who carried a truth too heavy for the world she lived in. Soon those shadows would close around her completely. The final day of filming began like any other, wrapped in the faint hum of generators and the soft clatter of equipment echoing across the lot. Stage 12 stood in its usual stillness, a cavern of half-light and suspended dust, waiting for the cast and crew to bring it to life. But for those who saw Martha that morning, something in her manner felt different. Her movements were precise, almost guarded, as though she were performing not just for the camera, but for something unseen, hovering at the edge of her awareness. She kept glancing toward the far end of the soundstage, the same dim corner she had studied days before, as if tracing the outline of a memory she didn't fully trust.
According to the official timeline, she filmed 2 scenes before stepping away for a short break. According to the crew's recollections, the moments that followed fractured into contradictions. A makeup assistant remembered seeing her walk toward the dressing rooms.
Their efforts
A
were in vain.
stagehand insisted she headed in the
After
opposite
several
direction,
agonizing
toward the exit
moments.
that led deeper into the soundstage. Someone else reported hearing her name called softly from somewhere behind the set walls, though no one could identify the voice. In the space of only a minute, Martha Mansfield vanished from view. At first, no one worried. Actors often slipped away for a moment to adjust costumes or drink water. But 10 minutes passed, then 15. A quiet ripple of confusion spread across the room. When a production assistant was sent to find her, he returned pale, saying the
smoke cleared,
corridors
she
behind
was
stage
found to
12
have
felt
severe
wrongly
burns over her
silent,
whole
as though they were holding their breath. The assistant noted that the usual hum of activity, footsteps, distant conversations, the metallic whine of equipment had faded into an unsettling stillness.
It was during this strange lull that the fire alarm erupted, splitting the silence with a shrill, piercing cry.
On the
Smoke
other hand,
curled upward
some
like a
believe
dark
the accident
ribbon
was
from
more
behind a
on
set
Martha
piece,
herself.
and chaos surged instantly through the stage. In the confusion, someone shouted Martha's name. Another claimed to have seen fabric burning near an open passageway. But every account contradicted another, as though the scene itself were shifting too quickly for anyone to grasp what had actually happened. The studio's official statement would later declare it a tragic accident, the result of a sudden flare igniting part of her costume. Yet the
For this
timeline raised
possibility,
cold
Martha may
questions.
have ended the day by
No one could determine precisely where Martha had been in the minutes leading up to the fire. The spot where the flames first appeared did not align with the scenes she filmed that day. And several witnesses who attempted to provide details found themselves quietly dismissed by the studio, their accounts smoothed into silence. One crew member claimed he saw her moments before the smoke appeared, standing near the farthest corner of stage 12, alone,
born in
frightened,
New York,
and
but she
clutching
truly
something in her
kicked off
hands.
career while living in that
His
area.
statement never made it into the official record. Others whispered that when the flames erupted, Martha seemed to be running, not standing still, as if trying desperately to reach a door that someone had closed. These whispers, too, vanished into the studio's labyrinth of edits, revisions, and buried reports. What remained was a story polished for the public, an accident, terrible but simple, a tragedy contained within the accepted narrative of
after her
early
passing.
Hollywood's dangers.
It's unclear
But those
how
who
much
had
Martha
been there,
Mansfield had filmed
who
for
remembered the way the air felt heavy in the minutes before the flames, sensed a truth that resisted explanation. Something had happened in that missing span of time, a pocket of minutes that refused to align with logic or testimony. The silence around them was too deliberate, too precise. After the chaos subsided, after the smoke thinned and the stage was shrouded in a somber hush, someone noticed that Martha's dressing room door
in the
stood
film,
open.
as the studio needed a
Inside
new
lay
way
her
to promote the
script,
project.
her coat folded neatly, and a cup of tea that had gone cold. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of haste, only a lingering stillness, as though she had expected to return. But she never did. The studio worked quickly to resume production, scrubbing the walls, repainting the damaged set pieces, and sealing the floor beneath new boards. Stage 12 reopened within days, its tragedy carefully packaged into a narrative that satisfied the public while protecting the machine that drove Hollywood forward. Yet those who had witnessed the event carried a different memory, a memory of something unfinished, something withheld, a presence that seemed to linger in the space long after the flames were gone. In the nights that followed, when the generators were shut down and the studio fell into darkness, Stage 12 settled into an uneasy quiet, and some crew members swore they could still hear a faint echo drifting through the corridor, a single footstep, sharp and lonely, tapping against the concrete, as though searching for the path she never reached. Years passed before anyone dared to look closely at what remained of that day. Stage 12 continued to function,
its walls repainted, its floors polished, its shadows rearranged by new sets and new productions. But there was always a corner, a narrow recess behind an old support beam that crew members avoided without explanation. Lights flickered there more often, sound equipment glitched. Extras complained of a cold draft that seemed to rise from the floor itself. Most dismissed it as quirks of an aging building. But those who had been present the day Martha disappeared felt something different, an unease that clung to the air like residue. The truth began to surface during a renovation nearly 3 decades later, when carpenters were instructed to replace parts of the old subfloor. As they pried loose a series of warped boards, one worker noticed a small object wedged deep beneath the beams, something metallic, something delicate. When he lifted it into the light, dust trailing from its surface like smoke, the crew fell silent. It was a hairpin, silver, scorched unevenly along its edges. The same style Martha was known to wear during the production, seen clearly in surviving photographs from the set. Its location made no sense. The beam stood in an area Martha had no reason to enter that day, and the gap where the pin was found lay within a space so narrow that no one could have reached it without being forced or dragged toward the wall. The discovery challenged every detail of the official account, reopening wounds the studio had spent decades sealing shut. But before questions could spread, the renovation supervisor removed the object, placed it in a small box, and ordered the team to continue working. The hairpin vanished into storage, logged under a generic inventory code. The studio never issued a statement.
Rumors, however, slipped through the cracks. A camera operator who visited the stage after the renovation recalled hearing a sound he could not explain, a single footstep echoing sharply at 3:12 a.m. during an overnight test. No one else was present. The lights were off, the recording captured nothing but static, yet he insisted he was not alone. Another technician claimed that, during a late-night equipment check, he saw what looked like a piece of white fabric flutter behind the support beam, the same beam beneath which the hairpin had been found. When he approached, the air felt unnaturally cold. The most unsettling account came from a night guard who walked the perimeter of the stage every evening. He reported that at exactly 3:12 a.m., he heard the unmistakable click of a high heel. Just one. A single sound suspended in the vast emptiness. When he turned, he saw a faint outline near the far wall, a shape that dissolved like mist the moment he blinked. He refused to step inside stage 12 alone after that. What tied every story together was not what people saw, but what they felt. The sense that someone was still searching, still reaching for something hidden, still replaying the final moments of a life interrupted. The discovery of the hairpin suggested a truth long concealed, one that hinted Martha had been cornered, that she had fought to escape, and that the fire was not the beginning of her tragedy, but the desperate end. But the most haunting detail came months after the renovation, when a junior archivist reviewing studio logs noticed an entry written in hurried handwriting. It referenced a missing personal item recovered from stage 12. Found near support beam. Belonged to MM. Do not catalog. The page was later removed from the file. Silence has a way of protecting power, but it also leaves traces, faint as dust on an abandoned stage, and in the case of Martha Mansfield, those traces refuse to stay buried. They rise in the late hours, in the flicker of failing lights, in the echo of a single step that repeats at the same minute every night. A reminder that truth, once hidden, does not disappear. It lingers. It waits. It walks. When the studio lights dim and the last footsteps fade beyond the lot, stage 12 settles into the kind of stillness that feels almost watchful. The cameras rest, the scaffolding sleeps, and the vast room becomes nothing more than an echo chamber of everything it has witnessed. Yet those who remain on the night shift know that the silence there is never complete. It shivers slightly, as though stirred by a presence that refuses to be forgotten. Martha Mansfield's name is no longer spoken in headlines or printed on marquees. Her films, fragile as the celluloid they were made on, survive only in fragments,
frames flickering with ghosts of movement, gestures she once performed under the hopeful belief that light could transform a life. But the truth she carried, the truth that shadowed her final days, was heavier than any role she ever played. It followed her into stage 12, pressed itself into the walls, and echoed through the missing minutes no report could explain. And so she remains, not as a legend fabricated for fear, but as a presence shaped by silence, an unfinished story sealed behind layers of paint, hidden beneath floorboards, whispered by those who have felt the air shift around them in the dark. Each night at 3:12 a.m., a single step resounds across the concrete. It does not threaten, and it does not plead. It simply exists, repeating itself with the patience of someone who has nowhere else to go. Hollywood is built on light, but its foundations are lined with shadows, soft, persistent, and threaded with the echoes of those who slipped between the glow and the darkness. Martha Mansfield is one of them, a woman whose fate was sealed not by fire, but by the silence that followed it, a woman still searching for the exit she never reached. And in stage 12, long after the applause has vanished, her story continues to walk through the quiet.